Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. We are your Las Vegas Raiders beat writers on Sports Illustrated, Hondo Carpenter and the great Ezekiel Trezevant, and we are glad to have you here today. Now, yesterday, Ezekiel wrote an article that went viral. I mean, it was been talked about on radio. It's been talked about border to border, coast to coast. He wrote an article that Aiden O'Connell is the most pro-ready quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders right now. And in there, he talked about there's a lot of great college quarterbacks that may come available, and he never said the Raiders shouldn't pick one. But he said for right now, with this roster where it is, there's not one guy in high school college right now that you're looking at and saying, they're excrementally better with that guy. Now, I would disagree with him. I think there's one, but only one, that could come in and be competitive with Aiden. But to be honest, with this roster and everything else, I would have to say I think that even Aiden would beat this guy out to start. Let's bring him in. Ezekiel, first of all, you've co-written an article with me that went viral, but this is the first that you've really wrote as a beat writer that got picked up all over the nation, and your voice was loud and clear. Talk about your thought process, my friend.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I think I would like to start there. Just to even be in this position is great, and it's a dream come true, first and foremost. But in terms of this specific article that I wrote, I was speaking from the heart. I will say that I had watched the entire 4 quarters of the game. We've been watching for the last year plus of Aiden O'Connell. And, overall, I just feel like a lot of times people look at a situation like the Raiders are in and they feel like, hey, if they just get a first round quarterback that may or may not be mobile, we can just plug them in and it's going to be hunky dory, as if Bryce Young doesn't exist. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to look at the roster that is around these guys. Again, like you kind of already pointed out, I'm fully on board with them drafting a quarterback. I am fully on board with them drafting Shedeur Sanders. I'm not saying not to draft a quarterback, but what I am saying is let's temper expectations of, hey, whatever young quarterback comes in is just going to save the team next year without a competent roster put around him. So when you look at week 1 next year, after what you just saw Aiden O'Connell do, and quick side point as well, every time Aiden gets a chance, he's put in the most dire of situations. Keep that in mind. Aiden is never given a great chance. He's already the underdog, and then you pile on in terms of the situation. Look at the times that he got into most of the games this year. They were down by 10, 20 points. Obviously, outside of the one game that he started, and then obviously Kansas City. Almost every time he's put into a bad situation, and he perseveres. So it's not just that Aiden goes to Kansas City and throws for 300 yards. It's that he throws for 300 yards and he's missing half of his defense, right? It's that he throws for 300 yards and everything else has gone wrong around him or has not gone right around him, and he still gets through it. So that brings me back to my point of what quarterback right now that is 6-5 in their conference or whatever it may be in college that you're going to throw on one of the lower tier rosters in the National Football League and be consistently competitive over 17 games that you can say for sure would be more competitive than Aiden O'Connell, which you've seen for the last season and a half. I don't think there's one.
So I took your story to an NFL person. I said, what do
I
you
did not
think
know.
of this?
Not to cut you off. I did not know this. I just want anybody watching to know. I have no idea what Hondo's about to say. I don't know what so I'm listening.
And he said to me, he goes, I think there's some potential at quarterback in this draft. He said, I don't think right now there's a can't miss quarterback. He said, but if there was a guy in college that I think could step in and play as good as Aiden did in Kansas City, he goes, I would say, he goes, I just like everything about him. He goes, but I don't know that he would have played better than Aiden. Aiden threw for more than Joe Burrow, than Josh Allen, and anybody else against Kansas City. He looked fantastic. And so I thought that only talked to one, but I thought would have made you feel. I did that after you called me today and wanted to talk to me. I told him what happened to you today, and I said, hey, I'd like your opinion. I sent him the article. So anyway, there you go. That's from an NFL personnel guy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And again, I want to make it clear. I am in no way saying they should not draft a quarterback. That is not what
No,
I'm.
nobody is.
And I should have said this in the article more clearly, but I'm not saying not to draft a quarterback. But what I'm saying is that even if you do draft a quarterback, I think it may be the wise decision to still start Aiden and bring that young quarterback along. Because again, I'm just saying, let's not be so short-sighted to think that you can just drop a great quarterback, a good collegiate quarterback, into a bottom-tier NFL team, and that it's just going to be hunky-dory over a 17-game period, going through everything that Aiden O'Connell has had to go through. I'm just saying, let's keep it all in perspective, I guess is what I'm saying. So, but again, I'm fully on board with the quarterback. I think Shador is the answer, but at the same time, week one, starting next season, if I had to put my money on it, my money, and I'm a very frugal guy, if I had to put my money on it, I'd put it on Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah, you are a frugal guy. In fact, when we go out, the only time I've seen you drink Hennessy is when I had to pay for it.
Very, very frugal.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit, but not too much. I have made the statement nobody has more to gain or lose Sunday than Aiden O'Connell. If he goes down and lays an egg in Tampa, that's not a good sign for him. But if he goes and continues to play well, he's shutting the mouths of doubters and he's making the Raiders question. At least he should be making them say, okay, we know we're going to need a quarterback, but if there isn't a dude there, do we do what we did last year with Brock Bowers and take a Travis Hunter? And if he plays the way he played, I think they're going to win 2 or 3 games down the stretch. Agree or disagree? Nobody in the Raider organization has more to gain or to lose than Aiden O'Connell this weekend.
1,000%. And there's a couple of points here, but in terms of that specifically, yes, obviously, because he just played great, and you can't follow that up with a bad game, or else everything that I just said a moment ago completely goes out the window, right, Aiden? So at the end of the day, you kind of have to back up what you've been doing, right? And you can't make it seem like, hey, you only play good against Kansas City, right? You want to make sure you're consistent, going down the stretch. So, but to your point, that's another thing that I think people need to keep in mind. Obviously, some of this goes into where do they finish at in the draft lineup, obviously, right? So if they win even if you win one game, if you look at the standings, you win one game and you can drop from 2 to 5 to 7 really quickly off of just one win. So a large part of this is where do the Raiders finish the season at? If they finish number 1, obviously it's an easy decision. But if you finish number 3, number 5, number 7, and there's other teams in front of you, that dictates some things. So I think that's first and foremost. And then you got to start looking at best player available. And how can you blame them for looking at best player available after how well they did with Brock Bowers?
So you were in the locker room today, talked to a lot of guys. You also talked to Aiden. Give us your thoughts on Aiden's mindset. He just seems chill, man, like a banana split.
Listen, I think one of the most fun parts of being a part of this all is getting to watch guys grow, right? Whether they grow slow or whether they grow fast, is watching guys grow. And Aiden is, he's come on, who's grown the most in the last year and a half, right? In terms of young players on the Raiders, or really any player on the Raiders, right? You got to think Aiden's up there, however you want to look at it. And, he's never really changed demeanors, you know what I mean? And I think that's pretty cool. And it's pretty hard to believe, right? Like, he's been thrown to the fire. I mean, like literally, like it's a very unique situation when you sit down and you think about the things Aiden O'Connell has had to go through since he got into the league. You can't find another situation like it. So even through all that, Aiden has relatively been the same dude, right? I don't think I've ever seen him be too much up or too much down. Sometimes you're like, man, Aiden, like sometimes you want him to be a little bit more fiery, you want him to be a little bit more anger, but like he doesn't. That's not in him, right? And I think that's what a lot of the players around the locker room like about him is that no matter what's going on, Aiden's the same guy. He's been the same guy from what I can see, and I think it goes a long way.
We saw Aiden and Gardner play their worst football under the previous staff. I think the number one thing that hurt this team, and you and I are going to do a deep dive at the end of the year about why the 2024 season failed. But I think the biggest reason, and I think there were a few big ones, but I think the business was the very bad hiring that set this team back offensively. Do you agree or disagree?
I think that, I mean, not to pile on, but I think, that is one of the bigger things. Yes. I think the roster itself has a lot to do with it too, more than most people want to realize. I just kind of speak my mind, I firmly believe that a lot of this did come down to the coaching first and foremost, but that trickled down into the offensive line too. And I think, not to necessarily bash, there's not anybody specific on the offensive line to necessarily put it on. I think it just, as a whole, they weren't really in unison. And you can tell, I mean, look at the last 5 weeks. They've been in unison, and look how good they've looked over the last 5 weeks. So I think a lot of
New
this went
coaches.
from, I think, and again, right. So I think it starts with the coaching, and I think you go down, and then because the coaching wasn't there, the offensive line play wasn't there, and I think it just goes hand in hand. But I think there's a lot of guys, that, I mean, come on, Sincere's doing great right now, right? Look at these guys that are doing well right now. If you put them behind that offensive line that was there the first X amount of weeks, I don't think it goes like that. I just don't think it would, right? So a lot of this just has to do with coaching and then getting the offensive line right. I think that has a lot to do with it.
JPJ, I know you talked to him today in the locker room. God bless that kid. I just like him. He just, I wish every fan got to know the guys like you and I do. I was talking to one of the players last night and just kind of laughing about just fun stuff. And JPJ, he's a lot different personality than Aiden, completely different. But like Aiden, everybody in that locker room just loves that kid. Your thoughts on JPJ?
Yeah, I think, you need, listen, I told you this the other day. I feel like you can't win football games with a bunch of choir boys. And JPJ is a great guy. He's a good guy. Don't get me wrong. But he brings the heat, right? And I think that's what a lot of guys appreciate about him, right? Like, yeah, it might cost you 15 yards sometimes. Don't get me wrong, but it's worth it in the long run, right? Now, because you've instilled that culture in terms of on that offensive line of toughness, of grittiness, because of the energy that he plays with. So I think it's hard not to like him. Obviously, you don't want it to hurt the team, but sometimes it's okay to go over,
I agree with you, by the way. I like him. I like his style. Brock Bowers, I get asked by so many people. Every national interview I do, they want to talk about Brock Bowers, and I don't blame him. He's a stud. And I explained to them the rest of the rookies are rookies. Brock Bowers walked in from day one, and you think that's a guy that's been there for 15 years. He's just, he conducts himself like a veteran. He acts like a veteran. He handles himself like a veteran, and his teammates treat him like a veteran. That guy is the absolute real deal. But you and I talked about it in training camp. It was just real clear early. There's guys different. He's cut out of it. And what I love is he's very fun. He is a kid. He's totally a kid. When you're not talking football, him and I've had some non-football conversations, and he's totally a kid. I've got kids his age, and so he totally is one of them. But when it comes to football, he's like a 30-year-old veteran, chiseled veteran, isn't he?
Listen, Brock Bowers is one of a kind, man. I mean, there's a lot of guys that come into the league and they have a lot of hype around them, and sometimes they live up to it, sometimes they don't. And Brock has fit the bill from literally from day one. I don't even have the words for him. I mean, you see it on Sunday every day, right, or every weekend. So you wouldn't think he's a rookie by any means. The first time I met him, I'm like, you would have thought, hey, maybe a second or third year player, but to not have ever played a snap in the league, you would have never guessed it. So, and he plays that way as well. So I think we all think that the Raiders got a special one in Brock Bowers.
So let me ask you, you know how to read the room. You were with AP today. Everybody saw the end of the presser. He acts like he's floating on air, doesn't he?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think from AP on down, I think a lot of people in the room, in the locker room, understand that there's a lot of larger things at play that nobody really has nobody has complete control over, right? And I think a lot of those guys, they're professional. Part of being professionals is being realistic with yourself and with everybody else about the situation that you're in. And I think there's a lot of things at play that nobody really has full control over. So if you got to control what you can control, and as cliche as it sounds, your attitude and how you handle things, it does go a long way, right? Like, there's been a ton of injuries. But guess what? You still got 17 games to play. So are you going to come in every week and be mad and be upset and be hurt, or are you going to make the most of what you have? And I think that's what those guys, starting from AP on down, are doing.
I agree with you. All right. He's the great Ezekiel Trezevant. Nobody better than that guy. Zeke, tell him where to find you on X.
Yes, sir. EZTREZ_SI.
Check them out. We'll see you later.